The throne room gleamed with gold and authority. King David sat elevated, crowned, surrounded by advisors and warriors. His presence commanded respect, hard-earned through decades of battle, betrayal, and divine favor. Generals bowed, prophets spoke, nations trembled at his name. This was the man who'd united Israel, conquered enemies, established Jerusalem as the city of God. But this wasn't where his story began. The camera pulled back slowly, the grand room fading into shadow. The sounds of court, voices, footsteps, the rustle of robes dissolved into something simpler, quieter, the bleating of sheep, the whisper of wind through grass, a young boy's voice humming a melody no one else would hear. Because before the throne there was a field, before the crown there was a staff, before the palace there was a pasture where a forgotten son watched his father's flock under an indifferent sky. David's journey to kingship didn't start with glory. It started with obscurity, with being overlooked, with long, lonely days where no one saw him, no one knew him, and no one believed he mattered. But God saw, and in those hidden years, in the silence, the solitude, the unseen battles, a king was being made. The world just didn't know it yet. 1 Samuel 6:17. David sat on a rocky slope, staff in hand, watching sheep graze across the hillside. The sun beat down mercilessly. Dust clung to his skin. His tunic was worn, patched in places, stained from work. This was his life. Every day, the same routine: wake before dawn, lead the sheep to pasture, watch them, protect them, bring them back at dusk, repeat. His brothers were home: Eliab, Abinadab, Shammah, the oldest, the strongest, the favorites. They helped their father Jesse with important work: business, trade, decisions. David, he was sent to the fields, out of sight, out of mind. He didn't complain, not outwardly, but sometimes, watching the sheep drift lazily across the grass, he wondered, is this all I'll ever be? His father barely looked at him. His brothers mocked him. David the shepherd boy, David who smells like sheep, David who'll never amount to anything. The words stung, but he'd learned to bury the hurt, to channel it into something else. Music: he'd carved a harp from wood, strung it carefully, and in the solitude he played, sang.
We can't stay here. We have
Poured
to
his
move
heart
now.
out to the only audience that never judged, God in the sky. The sheep didn't care about his songs. The hills didn't applaud, but something was happening in those lonely hours, something David couldn't see yet. Character was being built, faith was being forged, a king was being shaped in the wilderness. Without a crown, without witnesses, just a boy, his harp, and the God who saw him. 1 Samuel 16. Everything changed the day the prophet arrived. Samuel, the most respected man in Israel, the voice of God, came to Bethlehem. Word spread quickly through the small town. The prophet is here. Why? What's happening? He's going to Jesse's house. Jesse's heart raced. A prophet didn't visit randomly. This meant something significant. Samuel entered their home with quiet authority. His presence filled the room. "I've come to sacrifice to the Lord," Samuel said. "Consecrate yourselves and come with me." Jesse nodded, nervous and honored. "Of course, my sons, they're here, all of them. Well, almost all." David was in the fields, but Jesse didn't mention that, didn't think to call him. Why would he? This was important. This required his best sons, his strong sons, his sons who mattered. Samuel stood in their modest home, staff in hand, eyes scanning the family. "Bring your sons before me," he said. Jesse called them. One by one, his sons entered. Tall, strong, impressive. Each one looked like they could lead, could fight, could be chosen for something great. Jesse's chest swelled with pride. Surely God had come to honor one of them. Surely this was the moment his family would rise. Samuel looked at each son carefully. Eliab first, the eldest, the strongest. He looked perfect, kingly even. This must be the Lord's anointed, Samuel thought, but God's voice came clear and firm. "No, do not consider his appearance or height. I have rejected him." 1 Samuel 16, 1-7. One by one, Jesse's sons stood before Samuel. Eliab, rejected. Abinadab, passed over. Shammah, not chosen. Samuel's face remained unreadable, but confusion grew in his heart. Each son looked capable, strong, ready. Yet God's voice kept saying, "Not this one." Jesse presented all 7 of his sons, 7 strong young men, 7 potential leaders, and God rejected every single one. The room grew tense. Jesse's confidence faded into bewilderment. Samuel's confusion deepened into certainty. He'd heard God correctly. God had sent him here to anoint a king. But who? Samuel turned to Jesse. "Are these all the sons you have?" The question hung heavy. Jesse hesitated, shifted uncomfortably. Well, there is still the youngest. He said it dismissively, like an afterthought, like mentioning the family dog. But he's tending the sheep. Samuel's eyes sharpened. Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. The command was clear. Urgent. Jesse sent a servant running. Get David now. Minutes felt like hours. The brothers exchanged glances. David? Why would the prophet want David? He was just the shepherd boy, the youngest, the least, the one they'd forgotten to even mention. But Samuel waited, patient, certain, because God had already shown him the truth. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And somewhere in a field, unaware his life was about to change forever, David was being summoned. 1 Samuel 60:10-11. David was adjusting a lamb's position in the fold when he heard shouting. David! David! He looked up, squinting against the sun. A servant from the house was running toward him, breathless and urgent. Your father needs you, no. What? Why? Just come. The prophet Samuel, he's waiting. David's stomach dropped. Samuel? The prophet Samuel? At their house? Waiting for him? That made no sense. Prophets didn't wait for shepherd boys. They met with kings, priests, important people. Not him. But the servant was already turning back, gesturing frantically for David to follow. David glanced at the sheep, secured the gate quickly, then ran. His sandals pounded the dirt path. His heart raced. What could this possibly be about? Had he done something wrong? Was someone hurt? As he ran, dust kicked up around him. His clothes were filthy, his hair tangled. He smelled like sheep and sweat. He wasn't prepared for company, especially not a prophet. He burst through the door of his family's home, breathing hard, and stopped. The room was silent, tense. All his brothers stood in a line, faces unreadable. His father looked stunned, and in the center of the room stood an old man with piercing eyes and a presence that filled the entire space. Samuel. The prophet's gaze locked onto David immediately, and something shifted. Samuel's face softened. A small smile touched his lips. This is the one, Samuel said quietly. God's voice had spoken clearly. Rise and anoint him. This is the one. 1 Samuel 16:12. David stood frozen, confused. Anoint him? For what? Samuel moved toward him slowly, deliberately. In his hands he held a horn filled with oil, golden, fragrant, sacred, the kind of oil used for priests, for kings. David's brothers stared. Jesse's mouth hung, slightly open. No one spoke, no one moved. Samuel stopped in front of David, looked into his eyes, saw something there, something God had seen all along. Faith, purity, a heart fully devoted. Kneel, Samuel said gently. David obeyed, trembling. He didn't understand, didn't know what was happening, just knew this moment was significant, life-altering, sacred. Samuel lifted the horn, tilted it, and poured. The oil flowed over David's head, warm, thick, soaking into his hair, running down his face, dripping onto his dusty tunic. It was a private anointing. No crowds, no celebration, no announcement to the nation, just family, just witnesses who didn't fully understand what they were seeing. But heaven understood. Angels watched. God smiled. Because in that moment, the future king of Israel was being marked. Not because of his strength, his brothers were stronger. Not because of his status, he had none, but because of his heart. From that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. The anointing wasn't just symbolic, it was impartation, power, destiny, calling. Everything changed in that moment, but nothing looked different. David was still the shepherd, still the youngest, still overlooked by everyone except God. And that was enough. 16. The oil dried, the prophet left, the moment passed, and David, he was sent back to the fields. No crown appeared on his head. No throne materialized. No soldiers came to escort him to a palace. Just go back to the sheep, David. His brothers returned to their work, whispering among themselves. His father looked at him strangely, confused, maybe proud, maybe concerned. But no one said much. What was there to say? A prophet had anointed their youngest son. But for what? They didn't know, and David didn't either. So he walked back to the field, staff in hand, oil still faint in his hair. Heart pounding with questions. God, what just happened? No answer came, just the familiar sight of sheep grazing, the same hills, the same sky, the same solitude. It would have been easy to feel disappointed, to expect immediate change, to think anointing meant instant promotion, but it didn't. David had been chosen. But the preparation wasn't over. The training had only just begun. So he returned to his post, resumed his watch, played his harp under the stars, and something shifted inside him. He'd been anointed. That meant something. Even if he couldn't see it yet, even if no one else understood, God had marked him, set him apart, given him purpose. And that knowledge, that certainty would carry him through everything that came next. The battles, the betrayals, the years of waiting. Because destiny doesn't start with recognition. It starts with obedience in obscurity. And David was learning that lesson in the most hidden place possible, alone with sheep, unknown to the world, but fully seen by God. 1 Samuel 16:10. Nights in the wilderness were David's favorite. The sheep settled, the world grew quiet, and he was alone with God. He'd build a small fire, just enough for warmth, sit with his harp across his lap, and play. The music started simple, a few notes, a rhythm. Then it grew. Melodies poured out of him, raw and honest. Songs about God's faithfulness, about loneliness, about longing for purpose, about trusting when you can't see. These weren't songs for an audience. They were prayers set to music, worship without performance, intimacy without witnesses. "The Lord is my shepherd," he sang softly. "I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul." The words came from deep inside, not from tradition, but from experience. He knew what it meant to be a sheep, to need guidance, to depend entirely on the shepherd. And now he was learning what it meant to trust God the same way. "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." He'd walked through dark valleys, literally, leading sheep through dangerous terrain, watching for predators, fighting off threats. But he'd never been alone. God had been there, every time. The stars above seemed to listen, the fire crackled, and David poured out his heart. These songs, these psalms would one day be sung by millions, would comfort kings and peasants alike, would echo through centuries. But right now, they were just between a shepherd boy and his God. Psalm 23. The attack came without warning. David was leading the flock through a narrow pass when he heard it, a low guttural growl. His blood went cold. He turned slowly and saw it, a lion, massive, muscles rippling beneath tawny fur, eyes locked on a lamb at the edge of the flock. The lamb bleated in terror, the flock scattered, and David stood between them and the predator. His heart hammered, his hands shook. Every instinct screamed, "Run, hide, save yourself." But the lamb was his responsibility, the flock his father's livelihood. He couldn't abandon them, so he didn't run, he charged. The lion roared, lunging toward the lamb. David intercepted, grabbed the lion's mane, yanked with all his strength. The beast turned on him, snarling, claws slashing. David felt pain, sharp, burning, but he didn't let go. His staff swung hard, connecting with the lion's skull. Again. The lion thrashed, trying to shake him off. David held tighter, praying desperately. "God, help me." Strength surged through him, not his own, supernatural, divine. He wrestled the lion to the ground. His hands found its throat, squeezed, crushed, until the beast went limp. David collapsed beside the dead lion, gasping, bleeding, shaking. The lamb stood a few feet away, unharmed. The flock slowly returned. No one saw it, no one knew. Just David, the lion, and God. But in that moment, something was proven. David wasn't just a shepherd. He was a protector, a warrior, and he'd fight no matter the cost. 1 Samuel 74:35. Weeks later, another threat. This time, a bear. It came in the early morning while mist still clung to the ground. David heard the commotion, panicked, bleeding, the heavy sound of something large moving through brush. He grabbed his staff and ran toward the noise. The bear had already snatched a lamb in its jaws. Blood dripped. The lamb cried out weakly. David's anger flared. "No!" He sprinted forward, shouting, waving his staff. The bear turned, dropping the lamb. It rose on its hind legs, towering, terrifying, ready to kill. David should have been afraid, should have backed down. But he didn't. He remembered the lion, remembered God's strength, remembered his responsibility, so he ran straight at the bear. It swiped, claws raking across his side. Pain exploded, but David swung his staff with everything he had, connected with the bear's head. It roared, stumbled. David grabbed its fur, using momentum to throw it off balance. They crashed to the ground, wrestling, struggling. The bear's strength was overwhelming, but David's desperation was stronger. He pinned it. His hands found its throat, and like the lion before it, he didn't let go until it was over. When the bear finally stopped moving, David released it, crawled away. Blood soaked his tunic. His body screamed in pain. But the lamb, wounded but alive, lay nearby. David carried it back to the flock, bandaged its wounds, tended his own. No one knew about this either. No applause, no recognition, just another day in the wilderness. But God saw, and David was learning. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's obedience, despite it. 14:36. In the quiet moments after battle, David wrote. His fingers were calloused from the harp. His hands still bore scars from the lion and bear. But the words flowed. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? The words weren't theory. They were testimony. Born from nights alone in the dark, from facing predators twice his size, from learning to depend entirely on God. When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. He'd seen it. The lion had fallen. The bear had fallen. Not because David was strong, but because God was. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. These songs became his anchor, his way of processing, his method of remembering God's faithfulness. Some were celebrations, others laments. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? He was honest with God about the loneliness, the confusion, the waiting, about feeling forgotten while his brothers lived important lives, about being anointed but still unseen. But every psalm ended the same way, with trust. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. David was developing an inner life, a relationship with God that didn't depend on circumstances, that thrived in hiddenness, that found God in the wilderness. These psalms would one day fill the Bible, would teach generations how to pray, worship, lament, and trust. But right now, they were just one boy's conversation with his God. Psalms 27:13. Rumors reached even the shepherd fields. David heard them from travelers, from his brothers on rare visits home. The Philistines were gathering. Their army, massive, organized, terrifying, was assembling near the valley of Elah. King Saul was mobilizing Israel's forces. War was coming. David's three oldest brothers, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, had joined Saul's army. They'd left with pride, with swords, with the honor of defending Israel. David stayed behind, with the sheep. As always, he tried not to feel bitter about it, tried to focus on his responsibilities. But part of him wondered, when will my time come? He'd been anointed. The Spirit of God rested on him. He'd killed lions and bears. But he was still just the shepherd. The rumors grew darker. The Philistines had a champion, a giant named Goliath, over 9 feet tall, covered in armor, mocking Israel daily, challenging anyone to fight him. No one accepted. Israel's army, including David's brothers, trembled in fear. David heard the stories and felt something stir inside him. Not fear, anger. How dare this pagan giant mock the armies of the living God? How dare he blaspheme God's name while Israel cowered? But David was miles away, watching sheep, waiting. One morning, his father called him. David, take this food to your brothers, check on them, bring back news of how they're doing. It was a simple errand, a servant's task, but it would change everything, because David was about to walk onto a battlefield, and destiny was waiting. 1 Samuel 17:12-19. David arrived at the valley of Elah with a bag of roasted grain and bread for his brothers. The Israelite camp sprawled across the hillside, tents, soldiers, weapons. The air was thick with tension. He found someone to watch his supplies and hurried toward the battle line. He wanted to see what was happening, wanted to find his brothers. That's when he heard it. A voice, deep, booming, mocking. Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. David froze. His eyes widened. There, standing in the valley between the two armies, was the giant, Goliath. He was massive, taller than any man David had ever seen. His armor gleamed in the sunlight. Bronze helmet, coat of scale armor weighing 125 pounds, bronze greaves on his legs. The spear in his hand was as thick as a weaver's rod. He looked invincible, unstoppable, terrifying. And he was laughing, mocking. I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man and let us fight each other. The Israelite soldiers stood frozen, silent, afraid. Some stepped back, others looked at the ground. No one moved forward. David watched in disbelief, and something inside him ignited. Not fear, fury, righteous anger. This uncircumcised Philistine was mocking God's people, and no one was doing anything about it. 1 Samuel 17:26. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? David's voice cut through the silence. Soldiers turned, surprised. A boy, dusty from travel, unarmed, unknown, was speaking boldly. David looked around at the men, trained warriors, soldiers with armor and weapons, and they were cowering. What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? A soldier answered, almost embarrassed. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. David's eyes lit up, not because of the reward, but because of the injustice. This giant had been mocking God's people for 40 days. 40 days of blasphemy, 40 days of fear, 40 days of dishonor, and no one had stepped forward. David turned back toward Goliath, who was pacing in the valley, shouting insults, daring someone, anyone, to fight him. "I'll do it," David said quietly. The soldiers near him laughed, thought he was joking. But David wasn't joking. He was dead serious. Word spread quickly. A boy says he'll fight the giant. Is he crazy? Someone stops him before he gets himself killed. The commotion reached David's brothers. And Eliab, the oldest, the one who'd been passed over by Samuel, came storming over. His face was red with anger and embarrassment. "Why have you come down here?" Eliab snapped. "And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." The words were sharp, cutting, public humiliation. 1 Samuel 17:26-28. David's face flushed. His brother's words stung, not because they were true, but because they were said in front of everyone. Eliab was trying to put him in his place, remind him he was just the shepherd boy, the youngest, the one who didn't belong. "Now what have I done?" David said, voice steady despite the hurt. "Can't I even speak?" He turned away from Eliab, refused to be silenced, refused to shrink back. He'd been overlooked his entire life, sent to the fields while his brothers got honor, forgotten when the prophet came, dismissed at every turn. But not this time. This time, something bigger was at stake. God's name, God's people, God's glory. David continued asking questions, making his case. Who is this Philistine that he should defy the armies of God? Word reached King Saul. There's a young man asking about the giant, says he wants to fight him. Saul was intrigued, maybe desperate, maybe curious. Bring him to me. David was escorted to the king's tent. Saul sat there, tall, armored, looking every bit the warrior king. But his eyes were weary, defeated. 40 days of Goliath's taunts had broken something in him. David stood before the king, young, unarmored, unimpressive. Saul looked him up and down and almost laughed. "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." It was a reasonable objection. David was young, untrained, small, but David wasn't discouraged. He'd been preparing for this moment his entire life, and he had a testimony. 1 Samuel 17:31-33. David looked King Saul in the eye. No fear, no hesitation, just quiet confidence. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," David began. "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it." The tent went silent. Saul leaned forward. "Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear." David's voice grew stronger. "This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." He paused.
Who is this
Let the
giant?
words sink
He
in,
is a champion
then
from their
delivered
army.
the truth
Is
that
he
changed
unbeatable?
everything.
No one is.
"The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." It wasn't arrogance. It was faith. Proven faith. Tested faith. David wasn't trusting in his own strength. He was trusting in God's faithfulness, and he had evidence. The lion, the bear, victories no one had witnessed, battles fought in secret, preparation done in obscurity, all leading to this moment. Saul studied David, saw something in his eyes, belief, conviction, the kind of faith Saul himself had lost. Finally, Saul nodded. Go, and the Lord be with you." Relief flooded the tent. But Saul wasn't sending him unprepared. Here, Saul removed his own tunic, placed it on David, then his coat of armor, bronze helmet, everything a warrior needed. David stood there, weighed down, barely able to move. He tried walking. Couldn't. The armor didn't fit, wasn't his. "I cannot go in these," David said. "I am not used to them." He removed the armor, stood in his simple shepherd's tunic, and picked up his staff. 1 Samuel 17:34-39. David walked toward the stream at the bottom of the valley, his staff in one hand, his shepherd's bag in the other. Behind him, the entire Israelite army watched, thousands of soldiers, all eyes on the shepherd boy walking toward certain death. David knelt by the stream. The water was clear, cold. He reached in and selected stones, smooth, round, perfect for his sling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He placed them carefully in his bag, tested the weight. These weren't random stones. He'd used stones
You're
like
just
these
a boy.
countless times,
I'm ready,
protecting
sir.
sheep, practicing
This isn't a
aim,
game.
perfecting
I
his
can
skill.
prove it.
Hours alone in the fields, slinging stones at targets, training no one saw, preparation no one acknowledged. But it was real, effective, deadly. David stood, sling in hand, stones ready, and began walking across the valley toward Goliath. The giant saw him coming and laughed, a deep, mocking laugh that echoed across the valley. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" Goliath's voice boomed. He looked at David with disgust. "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." The threat was real. Goliath had killed many men, crushed warriors with his bare hands. This boy would be easy. David kept walking, steady, focused, no fear in his eyes. He called back, voice clear and strong. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." The valley fell silent. Every word carried weight, power, authority. 1 Samuel 7:40-45. "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands," David continued, voice unwavering, "and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." The Israelites gasped. The Philistines stirred. This boy, this nobody, was prophesying victory. "All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Goliath roared in rage, started moving toward David. The ground shook under his weight. His armor clanked, his spear gleamed. David didn't retreat, didn't hesitate. He ran toward the giant, reached into his bag, pulled out a stone, loaded his sling. The motion was practiced, smooth, effortless. All those hours alone, all those nights protecting sheep, all those unseen moments of preparation. This was what they'd been for. David's arm swung, the sling whirred through the air, released. The stone flew, a small projectile, against an armored giant. It looked impossible, laughable. But the stone didn't miss. It struck Goliath square in the forehead, the only exposed part of his massive body. The giant's eyes went wide, his knees buckled, and with a thunderous crash he fell, face first into the dirt, dead. The valley went silent, stunned, disbelieving. Then chaos. Israel erupted in victory cries. The Philistines fled in terror, and David stood over the fallen giant, breathing hard, vindicated, proven. The hidden years were over. The world had just seen what God had been preparing in secret. 1 Samuel 17:46-50. David walked over to Goliath's body. The giant lay motionless, stone embedded in his skull. David looked down at him, the man who'd terrorized Israel for 40 days, the man no trained soldier would face, brought down by a shepherd boy with a sling. David grabbed Goliath's own sword. It was massive, heavy, ornate, designed for a giant's hand. He lifted it with both hands, and with one powerful swing, he cut off Goliath's head. He held it high. The Israelite army roared. Soldiers who'd been paralyzed with fear moments ago now surged forward, chasing the fleeing Philistines. The battle turned into a rout. The Philistines scattered, abandoning weapons, supplies, camp. Israel pursued them all the way back to their cities, plundering as they went. Victory, complete, overwhelming, impossible. David stood in the valley, holding the giant's head covered in blood and dust. He wasn't a shepherd anymore. Not really. The world had seen him now. King Saul summoned him. "Whose son are you, young man?" It was a strange question. But it revealed something. David was still unknown, still from nowhere, still the forgotten son. I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem, David replied. Saul studied him. This boy had just done what no warrior in Israel could do, had defeated the champion, had saved the nation. Jonathan, Saul's son, watched from nearby, and something stirred in his heart. Respect, admiration, love. He saw David's courage, his faith, his heart, and knew this is a man worth following. 1 Samuel 17-58. David returned to the Israelite camp a hero. Soldiers cheered. People wanted to touch him, hear his story, understand how a shepherd boy killed a giant. But David didn't revel in the attention. He was humble, grateful. He knew the truth. It wasn't his strength. It wasn't his skill. It was God. Always God. The victory belonged to the Lord. That night, sitting by a fire, David pulled out his harp, the same harp he'd played in lonely fields, the same instrument that had comforted him through isolation. And he played, sang a new song. I will exalt you, Lord, for you lifted me out of the depths and did not let my enemies gloat over me. Lord my God, I called to you for help, and you healed me. The soldiers around the fire listened. Some wept, others worshipped, because they recognized something. This wasn't just a warrior. This was a man who knew God, who walked with God, who trusted God. The hidden years had done their work. The wilderness had prepared him. The obscurity had shaped him. The battles no one saw had trained him. And now, standing on the edge of destiny, David was ready. Not for glory, not for fame, but for purpose, to lead, to shepherd, to point people to God. The stone had been thrown, the giant had fallen, but the story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, because the boy who was anointed but forgotten was about to step into everything God had prepared for him. The throne was still years away. Trials were coming. Battles, both external and internal, awaited. But David was no longer the forgotten son. He was the giant killer, the future king, the man after God's own heart. And nothing would ever be the same. Psalm 30, 1 Samuel 18.